Hello, listening people.
Hello.
Hello, Bartek, how are you?
Good, Ryan. How are you?
Oh, I am just excited. As Big Kev, the Australian icon, used to say, I'm excited. How about yourself, Bartek?
Good. Even though you're saying my name Bartek, I have looked at the last couple of episodes that we did, specifically the YouTube uploads, and I looked at the transcript, and for some reason, every time my name is said in the last couple of episodes, it comes up in all caps BK.
Oh, I thought it was going to be music, when sometimes
I've got a musical name.
The captions don't understand, they put just music in there. It's like, it's music happening, because it's rhythm, I guess.
You say Bartek, it hears BK.
Are you relation to DK?
Mm-hmm. I'm Bonky Kong.
Is there a BK in the DK universe? Is there a B Kong? Is there a
I don't think anyone
Baby Kong?
Other than like King K. Rool, no, I don't think there's too much just characters being known by initials. I mean, if they were, there's Diddy Kong. He's also,
but he came after Donkey Kong, so he'll be DKJ. Like, he's not.
Well, Donkey Kong Jr. is also a character, right? So it can't be Diddy Kong. Have you not played Donkey Kong 3?
I've never played a Donkey Kong game in my entire life. I've never owned one, at least. I've played them maybe at a friend's place, but I've never owned or played one. And we're not doing, sadly, the Super Mario Brothers movie that features Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. We're not doing that today.
I played the original one on NES. Emulator, of course, because...
Wow, you weren't a real kid who had an NES?
I didn't have an NES, no. And I played 64.
Thank you for allowing us to know your history.
And
now, did you play it on emulator, the 64, or did you actually have a 64?
I've never had a 64.
Wow,
But when
what was your excuse? Why didn't you have one?
I had PlayStation.
Oh, yeah, me too. Dog, me too. I had a PlayStation, I had a Sega, all of that.
I have played on... there was a Nintendo 64, like holiday program I went to, and they had a couple of games. I remember they did have Donkey Kong 64, and I played the multiplayer of that on an actual N64.
And was Diddy there?
I can't remember who was in the multiplayer, but he's in that game.
That is good to hear.
It's the DK rap game, Ryan.
Oh, of course. And we are not, in fact, a gamers podcast. We don't do gaming content unless it is video game movies that are adaptations of video games. And we're not doing that either today. For, in fact, we are here to talk about a movie that has come recommended from you, the listening people. That's right. On our show, we have a cycle of recommendation in which people toss a film into the bucket and we pull it out and say, this is the one we're watching. And it starts wiggling and jumping about and we have to get the hook out of its mouth. And I previously recommended a movie. Bartek is going to recommend a movie next. But this week, it is on the listening people out there. And we have had a slew of Czech movies be recommended to us because we have covered a few Czechoslovakian films.
Kind of recommended to us. This one was.
Yes. Well, we've had others of like, oh, you should check this out, or this one's good.
Sorry, yes, the ones we haven't done yet, yes, we have a slew, for sure.
We have a slew of Czechoslovakian movies recommended to us in our list, and now this is the first one we're actually doing that's been recommended to us.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking of ones we've done already, and all of them were recommended by you.
Silly Billy. Now we're doing one by the listening.
BK.
Yeah, sure it is. Billy. Billy K.
Am I Billy for the rest of the episode?
No, we leave the name changes for our guest Oliver whenever they return, and I just use a series of different names because they foolishly gave me permission to say whatever I want, and they are ruining that day right now even.
And 2 million people have apparently listened to it.
Let's talk about the movie that is up for discussion, and what Czech movie are we diving into today? What one are we getting our fingers in the dirt of and scrounging around to see if there's oil underneath?
Well, check this out, guys. The film that we are covering today, or in this episode, you can listen to it any day.
Or night.
Or night, I guess.
Yeah, or dusk.
Speaking of days, tomorrow I'll wake up and scald myself with tea.
Yeah, but what's the movie called, Bartek? We know that's your itinerary for tomorrow, but what's happening on today's podcast?
On this episode, we are covering the film of which is titled for sure, Tomorrow I'll Wake Up and Scold Myself with Tea.
Oh, that's the name of the film.
Yes.
Of course it is. It's a Czech film from the was this a 70s one? Yes.
77.
Often the titles of these movies are very long and ludicrous and just statements of fact, and I love that about them. And
it's really great.
This film is available on YouTube with English subtitles, so if you have not had the opportunity to watch the film, it is freely available. It is up there. I say that you should. It's only 90 minutes long. It doesn't outstay its welcome.
It's on YouTube. It's like the emulator of films.
You know it's an emulator because at the end, did you stay to the end of the video? At the end, it has it flashes after the credits of what movie making program that they edited this on. They've like the free video maker or something. It's very funny.
I scanned my cursor over the timeline. I didn't see something blue.
It was funny. It was very amusing. But
that was from the 70s, man.
The film is there online. Look up the title. Just copy and paste what we've put here and watch it for yourself. The pitch of the movie is it's a science fiction time travel affair in which a group of Nazis in the 1970s want to go back in time and prevent the war being lost for Nazi Germany and restore the glory, and hijinks ensues from there. It is a comedy, of course, with many Czech films. They are often comedic. We have yet to do one that's dramatic in nature. We have had some recommended to us that are dramatic in nature that are also available on YouTube. So perhaps one day we'll get to a more serious one. But let's go into, I guess, histories, relationships, or any kind of preconceived notions of this film. But Bartek, you are the person on here that speaks another language than our own. You're the person who knows Polish. And Polish, does that have any kind of crossover with the Czech language by any chance? Is there any kind of overlapping there?
A little bit. I think maybe I've mentioned it before. On and off the podcast. Maybe. I'm not too sure.
For those tuning in for the first ever time, maybe they need a bit of a refresher. So they're near geographically to one another.
Yes, one is north of the other and one is south of the other.
Guess which one it is. At home, email us in. Which one do you think it is? Don't look it up. Don't look it up.
If you're thinking top to bottom, it's non-alphabetical order.
Ooh, but the Czech language is, how have you described it in the past from your Polish ears?
I've described it as kind of sounding like a silly version of Polish, because a lot of the words are very similar, but like just slightly off. I think I've compared it a little bit to like if someone was speaking English with like a really exaggerated lisp or something like that. Like if I said, my name is Bartek, it's like, my name is Bartek or something like that.
Like when we hear South Africans or New Zealanders, for instance, in which in their case, it's a thick accent difference.
It's not that the language inherently is, funny sounding. It's more of like an esoteric thing of like, I'm so used to the Polish language that when I see a slight variation of it, it just seems a little bit funny to me.
So can you read the Czech version of this title? See if you can plow your way through so all
try.
of our Czech listeners can celebrate your stumbles.
Yes, that's fine. Your language is silly to me.
And so Bartek is silly to you for getting it wrong.
I'm fine with being silly. Also, I thought I was Billy.
I'm changing it up.
Okay. BK is now going to read this.
Baby boy Bartek.
From the very first sentence on the Wikipedia page for this film. The Czech title is Zítra vstanu a opárím se čajem.
Čajem.
And only that second word is familiar to me, vstanu, which is very similar to vstane, like I'll get up or I'll wake up.
Oh, so do you have what this is in Polish by any chance?
Yes, it's on the other tab on my phone.
Bartek uses a phone nowadays.
Yes.
Gone is paper.
Well, I used to use that netbook.
Yeah, gone is in a netbook now.
A couple of months ago, Rachel pushed it onto the ground.
She pushed it on the ground,
For people that don't know,
and
Rachel is
Bartek,
Ryan's
my significant
wife.
other, and the netbook cried
Mm.
because it was touched for the first time in years,
And then
and by a woman. By no.
every time Rachel came over after that, I put it like far away from her.
Yeah, yeah. So what is it in Polish? Tomorrow I'll wake up and scold myself with tea.
Yes, from filmweb.pl, a website I used a lot on unappreciated masterpieces. Jutro wstanę rano I oparzę się herbatą. Ooh, this has an extra detail. The third word in this is rano,
Okay.
which means like early, like I'll wake up early.
Oh, very good.
Yes, Poland is adding their own little details to the title, like, oh, we're better than you, Czech.
What I know the difference between the Czechs and the Poles is the Poles are very punctual. They want to get there early. They don't get there early, but they want to get there early.
Well, they need to get up early because on Sundays you got to go to church, man.
And scold yourself with tea. Let's talk about the movie. I have seen this before. I was gathering a bunch of these Czech films, I should say, finding which ones were easily available, ones that were on YouTube, ones that had English subtitles, ones that had funny names or recurring actors that we have seen in previous Czech films. And I made a little playlist. There's like 6 or 7 movies I've gathered on just YouTube alone. There's ones on my watch list that I need to track down physical copies of. There's ones in my DVD collection that I have. And this was one of those. This was one I found, yes, on YouTube, of course. And I was so happy to see it. Didn't know what the premise of it was going to be. Just the title was funny enough, and it had a good rating, and people talked about it positively online. And it had some of those actors we've seen in things like Lemonade Joe or Dinner for Adele, or of course the lead actor in the last Czech film we did on this podcast is the villain in this movie too. One of the villains in this movie too.
We're probably going to be mentioning to Gentlemen, I Murdered Einstein, or whatever the structure of that title was, a lot, because the premises of these two films are noticeably similar.
But very different in execution.
Down to the fact that he is I would say, like the lead member of the main trio.
Yes, Gentlemen, I Killed Einstein.
That's it, yeah.
And this was a real pleasure for me. This was the most overtly 1970s of the Czech movies we have watched.
Yeah, the music was very
the music,
funky.
the fashion, the cultural stuff in there as well. I just had a real great time with this. I watched it earlier in the year, and then it was recommended to us, and I'm like, hey, I know it's available to watch, so let's just get this here.
Did you note down who recommended it to us?
You know what? I forgot. I need to slap myself on the wrist and say naughty boy Ryan here, because they were added, but you added them, and I just went, oh, I know that one, and I just put it on our list. And
I was there when you looked at the list, like, oh, I'll go with this one.
But for yourself, Bartek, I mentioned this earlier in the year. I even mentioned this film on the podcast, and I didn't really give anything away. I did say in our Gentleman, I Killed Einstein, watch the opening credits. They're very funny. That's all I said. I do believe I said it's weird to watch a movie that's opening credits are like a YouTube poop. That's what I said. And then I don't know if either you or Sean checked it out, but
I didn't, but I loved the opening credits.
Let's hear from you a bit more. So, what did you feel about this movie? What did you think going into it? And what did you think coming out?
Well, I think you're asking me what my history is with this film. And my history is that I haven't seen it before. You cheated on me in this one, where, most of the Czech films we experienced for the first time together. Mm-hmm. Like Lemonade Joe is the exception, because that was you discovering this great cinema. But this one you watched on your own, and it was like, oh, you didn't save it for a movie night, but that's okay. I'm watching it the same year you did, so that kind of makes up for it. I didn't know anything about this film. I saw what the title was, and it reminded me of the structure of a lot of the other Czech titles that we've watched, so I figured, okay, this is still going to be a comedy in that kind of vein. It might not be directed by Ulrich Lipski, but it might still be like that, and my expectation was spot on there. It had the same writers, I think, as Gentlemen, I Killed Einstein.
Yeah.
which makes sense.
It's an industry with certain pool of talent,
All-
and
all-
so
all
you'll
the-
see recurring names and
Yeah,
faces.
all the films that we've watched so far, regardless of, if it's all the Lipsky ones and then like the two that aren't, are all from that like 60s to 80s time. Because
Mhm.
Adela was 80s, right?
I think
Like
that
really
one was.
early?
I think that one was either really early or 80s or really late 70s. But yeah, it was right at the tail
Yeah.
end of that time.
I think it is one of the newer ones we've watched, which, still
Impressive.
older than us by over a dozen years. But yeah, I walked into this one blind. And I have to say, not even just the opening credits, but like the opening leading up to the credits as well. It was just like, oh, this is really what I wanted. Yeah, the film opens with, these guys are in this building and they enter this room. You don't know what's going on. And then a bunch of guys in the room do the Nazi salute, Heil Hitler. It's like, okay, Nazism is a thing in this film. And then they have a quick conversation about like, hey, we got time travel, we got a bomb, let's give it to Hitler.
Hey, don't forget the most important detail. A bird is also in the scene.
Well, right, I'm not going like minute details. I mean, I'm just giving the general flow of my point.
That was the most important because it's so fucking absurd that the bird is also a Nazi. Like, they're all Nazis.
Ryan,
Everyone's a Nazi.
Ryan, well, we're gonna get to the bird, but I need to finish my point.
Go on.
So they enter the room, they do the Heil Hitler, and yes, a bird does Heil Hitler as well. He doesn't do it with its wings, but it says it. So, yeah. They establish, hey, it's the future, we got time travel, we got this big bomb, let's give it to Hitler. And then the opening credits happen.
The music kicks in first.
You get
and then the opening credits.
You get some very funky 70s music.
Very funky.
And as you described with the YouTube poop, you have a lot of, I don't know if we could call it stock footage. You have
historical
footage of Hitler speeches and Nazi troops like marching. And sometimes it's playing normally, sometimes it's playing in reverse, but a lot of the time it's leading up to a funny loop of the animation. So that it's like, Hitler raises his arm to like the full salute and then he goes to lower it.
And then he raises it again real quick.
But the loop is that like, it goes lower and then up and then lower and then up. And these credits go for like 3.5 minutes or something like that.
And they're glorious.
And they're glorious. And there are so many different loops of like, I think with the soldiers marching, it's mostly just reverse. But with the Hitler one, it's always just finding
new ways to make him look like an idiot.
Yeah. Like there's one point where he's like, brushing his like
swooping his
hair back, and it's like, he's like just rubbing it back and forth.
It's them playing with the editing of archive footage of Hitler and the troops, and
all while funky 70s music is playing.
Very electronic and psychedelic funky 70s music plays. It is absolutely amazing because that opening, as silly as it is, like with them all heiling and the premise being immediately set up and we have the bird there's still a level of like, well, look, it's not cartoony level silly. Like in Gentlemen, I Killed Einstein, its opening is like up to 11 straight away. This one's at a good 7 of absurdity.
Yeah, this one didn't begin with nudity.
And women with beards. And then this one is, we raise it to 11 when we get to the opening credits, baby. That's when we punch you in the face with how zany we're going to be. I think I nearly fell off my couch laughing at that when it starts. I was like, I'm being in awe too, because and it isn't being used lightly, but this really is like a YouTube poop. Like that opening credit sequence is something that the early days of YouTube would do, in which people just kind of troll around and figure out that they can edit things themselves and play around with Movie Maker or whatever the fuck it is and just do something zany and weird and off the beaten path, and it's just playful. And that's what I really liked about this movie, is it's very playful.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Again, we're going to compare this quite a bit to the Einstein film. I think this film worked much better with its structure. I know that with the Einstein thing, one of the big things that I always got stuck on was like, they do the thing where they go back in time.
The time loop.
Yeah, the time loop. They go back in time, doesn't go too well, they come back to the present, they go back again. And like, oh, it felt like it needed like a rule of threes thing that only did it like the one time. Like, so you only got two versions. This one, it doesn't go for like the full story. It still kind of only does it twice, but you do get like three versions of at least the present stuff. And it does play around with like the specific recurring events. It's not like, oh, we'll play this one out completely differently. So yeah, definitely a lot more playful. Definitely, even setting you up for like, okay, these exact things are going to happen again, but already they've, butterfly affected it to where they won't happen, and like already new things are playing out, or like alternative events are playing out.
And there's also an element that you see in many time travel stories. In many of them, it's not a vocalized thing. It is just through action that time itself, or the universe, or fate, or destiny is trying to either course correct and or punish the people that are messing with time, because these Nazis that are messing with time, it's almost like the fabric of reality is going out of its way to screw with them, but it's never stated in the movie. That's just how it is. Like, oh, this guy gets out of the car and immediately gets run over. Fuck you to this guy. Or the head one, the really smart one, he gets executed in the past. Like, it is that thing in many time travel stories like this. It's either a spoken or unspoken rule of you can't play God with this stuff, and if you do, it just causes a real big mess, and it's almost like the entity of time is trying to fix itself, and to do that, it's going to fuck with the people that's messed with time. You know what film I thought about with this? Weirdly enough, I thought about, I'm forgetting its name, the Clint Eastwood movie we did earlier in the year, the one with
Every Which Way But Loose?
Every Which Way But Loose. And I know that's a weird one to pull, but I'm pulling it anyway because what this and that have in common is they're comedies. They're comedies from a certain era, from the 70s to 80s, and they just have a certain lax quality to them, but they're these over-the-top silly farces that underneath all of the jokes, underneath all of the gags, there's a loathing and a hatred for Nazis. And that's what I fucking adore about this movie, is it really is evident and clear that Nazis are a fucking joke. They should be not even pitied. We should spit on them. We should celebrate when they die. We should celebrate their failures. We should go out of our way to keep screwing with them. And I love that about this movie. This movie is very anti-fascist. It's like, fuck the fascists all the way through. And it's doing that while still having very moving sequences. It's like, this movie's funny, but also on the occasion, it will just throw in a very haunting little scene. And it's like, oh yeah, this movie's about like fighting fascists. Like, that's not always supposed to be like a joke. And this movie will take a little sidebar and go, don't forget, fascists are genuinely awful. They're not just boobs. And that's what, we've come across with a few movies over the years of just, we can have we can have our cake and eat it too and make fun of the Nazis, but also you need to make sure to not forget that they were genuinely awful.
Yeah, we've talked about that a few times. I always, reference, there's that Lindsay Ellis video where it's talking about Mel Brooks's stance on it, where if you're going to depict the Nazis and things, don't make them look cool or powerful or, desirable. Make them the butt of the joke. And this film 100% does that.
And it's not just that, too. They make them morally despicable, because you get that one in the group who lived through the loop, and he's now deciding that I need to kill the duplicates. And he's just so matter of fact about it. And it's like, you don't even have an allegiance to your own group. You're just out for yourself. You're like sick. And that guy, did you recognize that actor, the one with the little pencil mustache? Though I guess you would say the more prevalent of the Nazi group.
I know who you're talking about, but no, was he in one of the other things we did?
Lemonade Joe. He's the bartender. He's the bartender that switches allegiances of the bars. He's the one that's always there. He's the one that puts pepper in their drinks. He's the bartender.
Okay.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a bit of an understated character from that film.
Yes,
but
and
yeah.
I think he's been in one or two other things we've done. I know he has a lead role in an Lipsky movie that I hope to get a copy of, called Happy End, in which the movie's in reverse. The
Oh,
entire movie's in
yeah.
reverse.
We've talked about that one.
Where the end credits start and his head is in a basket and it rolls back onto his body. And you're like, how did he get here? But I was so happy revisiting this. I loved it the first time. I don't know if I laughed at. Here's the thing. I think it's better structured, as you say, in comparison to the very similar movie Gentleman, I Killed Einstein. But I found Gentleman, I Killed Einstein to just have certain funnier things, and it tickled my funny bone more than this movie does. But this movie, I admire it a lot more. That's the difference. Like, I admire this one.
I can see what you mean by that.
Time travel rules, its ideas, its universe. Like, even in the quote unquote modern day, it's still in a sci-fi world where they have time travel airports.
If you're not paying attention, you might think like, oh, this is, just the modern day. But then you have all these like weird little things where it's like, the airport where like all the flights aren't to countries, they're to time periods or to people. I think some of them even were.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this flight to Alexander the Great or something like that was one of the lines. Like, what a bizarre thing. Like, I could see this being like a David Lynch thing.
And or the technology, such as we have just this detergent.
Yeah.
That disintegrates and evaporates any substance we put it on, including people, which seems very reckless and scary, but it works.
And and this film, of course, going back to the stylings of these Czech films that we've watched, it has a lot of very funny little whimsical sound effects. Like, we have a minor running joke in the film where that villain who we were just talking about before, he's got a car where the boot just keeps opening if you even like tap the car. And every time it opens, you get like a slide whistle.
But it's like a synthesizer slide whistle too. It's like a zoop.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Dinner for Adele, where he's throwing things out the window and there were like laser sounds for no reason. It's not even in a sci-fi setting, that movie.
And I think the detergent has its own sound effect when it's being used.
Talking about the sounds, I really did adore, and it wasn't played for jokes, but it emphasized how this is a movie that's going to keep backtracking on itself a lot and that there's going to be repetition. But the soundscape of the movie was so deliberate in terms of getting us acquainted with certain sounds. And when we hear them again and again and again and again, it's almost like they are the buoys in the sea that we can attach ourselves to and go, okay, I know where I am because of this buoy here. And it's like every time they cut to the airport, you have that music over the top of it. Like,
oh, yeah.
I can't replicate it with my mouth right now, but you know that sound, like the dong, dong, dong. And
the clock had a sound to it.
And there's so many things like that, whether it's pieces of music or dialogue or just soundscape. And I thought, out of all the movies we've done from Czechoslovakia, former Czechoslovakia, this is the one where the music and the sound was the most important in the film itself. Like, it was so emphasized in this because underlying in your mind is that telling you, like, when we eventually circle back around to this, you're already accustomed to that because the film has already circled back around to lots of things in an audio sense.
The film wants to condition you condition these sounds to events or locations or props.
The film is honestly about two twin brothers, one of which is a piece of shit and he chokes to death because he laughs maniacally while eating, and that's very funny.
Yeah. So the actual, we've talked about the basic plot, but focusing on the Nazis, the twin brothers come into it where one of the twin brothers, really nice guy, one of them is a piece of shit, and the piece of shit works at the time travel thing in this setting, which is
the time travel airport, yeah.
Yeah, the time travel airport, which is more rocket ship than airplane. And yeah, he's a pilot, and he's made a deal with the Nazis to like help them out because he's a piece of shit.
He's a capitalist.
And Yeah, and you get a lot of the rules are established before we get the scene where he dies, where it's like, okay, we've made a deal with him in this. These are our secret code words.
Mm.
This is what he's gonna do during the plan.
This briefcase,
And then we're
assailant, yeah.
then he's gonna invite us into this room at this time, and then this will happen and this will happen. Okay, you've established the itinerary of the film. You get the scene where you meet him and his brother, and at the end of it, he chokes to death on that bread roll and dies. And you learn of the nice brother, who is our main character
He's
of
the
the
main
film.
character. Yeah.
John. Their names were Charles and John. John is the good one, Charles is the bad one. John takes it upon himself, because they're identical twins, to take that brother's identity, because he's established earlier that, you've got all these great things in your life and you take them for granted. You're going to squander all this. If I had your life, I would be, so happy. You've got a fiance who worships the ground you walk on, and you are just going to treat her like shit.
You have the job I wish I could have.
You have the job I wish I could have.
The job that I helped create for you, because I think he states he helped build.
Yeah, which is why he was able to pilot it. I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
he knows the technicals, but not the legitimate practical experience.
Yep, and while he's got the doctor who's like in the middle of writing the death certificate and hasn't worked out which brother is dead yet, he's on the phone to this fiance who's distraught, and in that little moment of like, I don't want to upset her, he decides, okay, I'm Charles, John is the one that died. And then that basically leads into like, you've seen movies before, they're going to be hijinks based around this, where, he doesn't know that his brother was going to be working with these Nazis and going to go with all this plan, and the code words that they said was just innocuous things that he's like, yeah, those are true facts. Yes,
the armchairs, they're fine.
Yeah,
he's looking at his armchairs. I don't know. Yeah,
it's like, for people that haven't seen the film, one of the codes was his other suits in the closet or something like that.
And he looks at his uniform in the closet. He's like, yeah,
and then the response was meant to be something like, well, then you better put them in there. And he's like, and the camera even pans over to the closet, and it's like, yeah, of course they are.
Another aspect to this is John, our noble character, now is taking his brother's identity, learning about how nefarious and awful he is, but also learning how little people care about him, like John, because he goes around telling everyone that my brother John died, and no one cares. They all give this fawning, oh, that's upsetting. Either way, like, no one gives a fuck about him. In fact, you learn that many characters haven't even met him, and then he points out, no, you have. And then they go, have I? He's just nothing. He's an absolute, like, zero to everyone. Like, he doesn't appear on the radar at all. So now he can take on his brother's life, this brother who is this gallivanting pilot who has a fiance, and then he finds out that he's cheating on the fiance with the co-workers, this and this, and he now is working with these fascists, and it's like, oh, his brother lives like a spy's life almost.
Yeah. And especially before he gets on the time travel ship, it plays out a lot like the Australian TV show, like Thank God You're Here, where it's like, he gets into a situation where a character knows their relationship or what they've been through, and they bring up these things, and he's like, has to play along with it.
He's improving, yes-anding.
Yes-anding. It's like, my brother died. I need to, have a little short break. And it's like, okay, fine, have your break, but then come back to work. What time do I start again? And the boss tells him, and he's like, and he improved his way to get the answer.
I'm here to flap a flapper. And he's like, I don't know who you are, so please don't hurt me. And it's like, now you're going to insult me by pretending you don't know who my wife is? Fuck you. So many great moments. And you said earlier that you've seen a film before when you get these hijinks of twins assuming each other's identities or being mistaken for one another. This is where the sci-fi comes in brilliantly. Is then it becomes time loop doubles, and there's multiple running around, and you are having a hard time keeping track of which one's which.
Yeah, that's...
And like where they go. But I didn't find it too confusing, but there were points where I'm like, okay, so gotta get a flow chart out a little bit here.
Yeah, it wasn't too confusing, but that's definitely one element that I would say it had over Einstein. I did like that they had the multiple versions of themselves running around. That added an element to it.
And in all versions of the timeline, Charles must die.
Yeah, end of the film. There are two identical individuals, that look the same, running around, but they're both John.
What I was saying before about the loathing of fascists is prevalent with the fact that the brother always dies. He always dies because he's not a sympathetic person. We shouldn't like him. We shouldn't want him to live. And even his own nice, good-hearted brother by the end of it is like, no, fuck him. He was a fascist. Like, he even goes beyond, like, the Nazis are like, oh, he's just a capitalist who's using us. And then throughout the adventure, they begin to think, oh, maybe he's better than that. And then they realize, oh, it's his twin brother. Oh, hijinks. But John realizes that his brother is more than just a selfish philanderer who's in it for money. He's like, no, my brother is trying to contribute to the rise of the Third Reich. He's a fucking fascist. Fuck him. Fuck him. He can choke to death for all I care. Like, and he doesn't do it in such a aggravated way that I'm saying, but that's a choice being made on the movie's part of no matter what, we cannot let this guy live because we've established that in a way he's the biggest villain in the whole movie. This guy who doesn't really have an allegiance to the Nazis, but he'll do it anyway because he's a selfish piece of shit. He's cheating on his wife, whose family are all a bunch of fucking circus freaks or trapeze artists, and they'll kill himself, the fiance, if she finds out anything. And it's all these horrible things about Charles you learn, and you're like, good. Watch him choke to death, and you're like, good. And then when they put the detergent on his body and it just eats him up, you just smile and go, yeah, good.
Oh, that's sorted out one of the conflicts.
That's sorted out one of the problems that they have to get through. Yeah, this movie has a lot of moving pieces, a lot of characters, and a lot of characters are duplicated, doubles and loops of time, and it is really exhilarating, though, at the same time. It has this moment where you know it's going to be gold because it uses a lot of great movie and storytelling tricks of the trade that we've seen before. This is doing it, though, in its own special formula, which is, I guess, the quote-unquote Americans arrive to the story at the airport. The old people, and they have a similar suitcase to the one that has the hydrogen bomb in it that the Nazis must give to Hitler, and yeah,
you've seen Oscar before.
You've seen you've seen the movie Oscar before, starring Tim Curry and Marissa Tomei as the best couple ever.
I think Sylvester Stallone was in that film.
Stallone was there too, and one of the Simpsons guys was in it, as well as a funny Italian. But that briefcase, you get that introduced, and you're like, okay, now I definitely know what type of movie I'm in for. It's going to be one of these in which they're going to try and do their time travel plan, and it's all going to keep falling apart because of just these misunderstandings or these simple little things that they can't account for. And then they're going to try and redo it again, but there's going to be more complications and more and more and more and more. And I'm a sucker for those type of comedies. As are you.
It's one
comedy
of those,
of errors.
It's one of those things you see coming, and it's like, let me see the execution.
It's like a Rube Goldberg machine of comedy.
I know the punchline, but like, show me the lead up to it.
So where do you want to go from here? What do you want to dive in and talk about?
Yeah, we jumped around a fair bit.
There's a lot of time travel.
Yeah, it's not that I'm lost for words. It's like, well, where do we start is the thing. We've talked about the film begins with a lot of misunderstandings going. Okay, we'll talk a little bit still about the lead up to getting on the rocket ship. So we have a lot of our main character as his now deceased twin brother going around the airport, like learning about his brother, his relationships with other people, what they thought about him, like him actual self. And we have the Nazis who, they've laid out the plan, they have the co-conspirator, and they're waiting for him to make moves. And I really liked how, there are many points in the film where they get fed up with him, but in this early part here, one of them is interpreting our main character's actions as like, oh, he's good. Like, Oh, he's currently struggling a little bit. Oh, we'll send someone to call him over to the bar so he can have a chat with us. Once he sees us, then he'll come talk to us. He gets sent over to the bar. He comes in. He like looks around. He like kind of goes up to other people, and like he just happens to glance at one of them. Then he leaves, and one of them's complaining like, "What's he doing?" It's like, "No, that was great. That was really great." I really liked how there was a lot of over interpretation going on there, and one bit of they do this later on in the film, and it's a really good sign of character development for our main character. Is that only one of the Nazis from the first loop is still alive and active in the second loop? It's the one with the car that we mentioned, the bartender, mustache bartender from Lemonade Joe. He goes onto the ship in the second loop, and at this point, in the first loop, our main character obviously was struggling through everything. He was fucking up a lot of the plans. He wasn't inviting them to do this thing.
He lost their trust.
And he also found out that like, oh, it wasn't even the guy. It was his brother. Now he's in the second loop and he thinks that everything's going right. This is the actual brother, but it's still our main character from that first loop in the second one as well. But now he knows the plan and he's playing along with it. And he makes a comment about how like, yes, finally, everything is going much better this time because we've got the actual guy, and it shows that our main character has gotten smart.
He almost got executed. They gangland styled him, that particular Nazi, and he survived because he grabbed his brother's what was it? It was like his cigarette case, I do believe, or like razor.
I can't remember what it was.
It was a metal case, but they established that early on. And so he's aware of how dangerous these people are. First go around, he was just bumbling his way through and just really didn't understand. And as you said, now he knows their plan. Now he knows how dangerous they are. He can play along and undermine them. He's no longer just like a Peter Sellers character who's just bumbling their way through genius plans. Now he is someone who is an active participant in the story rather than just having the story happen to them. And that's great development for the character. And I love this actor's performance as well. He really differentiates the brothers, but also differentiates the timeline versions of the character of John. The earlier time of him, then him, he's gone on this loop once or twice. He really does a seamless performance with this. I never questioned which John I was watching, really, outside of maybe just like, oh, I'm trying to keep track of like the timeline, but usually I could figure out which John it was because of his performance, especially as it gets later on. He's becoming a little bit more manic as it goes because he's getting frustrated and he's trying to reach people and he's having to realize that I can't explain time travel to myself. There was that marvelous scene where he gets picked up from the junkyard and the guy in the truck lets him use his radio or his phone. And then he gets so fed up with this guy's bullshit, he kicks him out. And our main character's like, what the fuck? Why did this happen to me? Forget it.
Well, if you know the future, you know someone will pick you up.
Okay, you got me there. They eventually... Oh, I don't want to skip over this one thing. The fiancé and her family.
Eva.
That's one of those things where I say, thank you, the Czechs, because no other film, no other country would be brave enough to have that family just be presented like that's a matter of fact and you should accept it. They are like bouncing on trampolines, throwing knives. They got like the stuff coming up, and there was some comedic reasons for it, of course, and even plot thing in one of the moments, but it was just so funny to me. That's like, yes, and his beautiful fiance who loves him so much. We're on the phone to the mother, and in the background, she's on a trampoline, by the way. It's like, okay, interesting. And then you go there, and there's a guy throwing knives. I just loved how ludicrous and over the top that was. And they never played it up as a big joke. It was just, there's no big comedic set pieces with the fiance and her family. Just their
Well,
existence was funny enough.
I don't know. The trampoline incident was pretty much a set piece for me.
Yeah, like I look at that as just like a consequence of something, but like I don't think of it as like a big comedy set piece in the way that perhaps other moments in this movie play out. Like when they actually go back in time and they go to Nazi Germany, and you have the big comedic set piece of the suitcase and the projector and them trying to explain to Hitler like the calendar. Like that to me is like a big comedic set piece of just comedy of error upon comedy of error upon comedy of error upon comedy of error. Now the Americans are here and they're slapping Hitler and yelling at him and doing all of this stuff. That to me is an example of that. While the trampoline bit's like, oh, it's kind of funny they threw him on the trampoline and then they bounced off.
No, well, they threw him on the trampoline, and then she joined him on the trampoline, and then, like, the brother who is trying to get back at him jumps on the trampoline, and now there are so many people on the trampoline that they
cannot sustain.
That they lose balance, and then they all fall off the roof and die. It is amazing
once you say it out loud. It very much is that. But again, what I want to emphasize, and this is the difference too of direction. Lipsky, who we've done all the other Czech movies we've talked about have been Lipsky movies. He films those in a very specific way, while this was filmed for the majority of the time very matter-of-fact. Very matter-of-fact. To me, this isn't filmed like it's a comedy movie all that much. It's just kind of filmed just, here it is. And it's relying on the actors and the dialogue. And, of course, silly technology thing like the spray them in the face when they go green or the sound effects. But just on a visual level, it's just... we're framing the shot. Very workmanlike in its approach, which I think works in this movie's favor because it gets complicated. And if it was complicated on a visual level, like, say, Lipsky movie is, it could maybe get a little overwhelming. I think we talked about that with Gentlemen, I Killed Einstein, where it's like, okay, we've got a lot to process here in this movie. And this one, I thought they just did it, they shot it and just moved on. It was very just stock standard, but in a good way that benefited the film in my eyes, at least.
I seem to remember that trampoline scene had a bit of fast-forwarding stuff going on, but maybe I'm just misremembering.
It may have, but...
just like the bouncing was much faster than it looked natural, I think.
Yeah.
I might be wrong.
But they do go back to the Nazi era of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
They got there a little early.
Yeah. They thought that they were going back on this specific date in 1944, like a few minutes before, a really big event was going to happen that like would spell the defeat of the German side. And they got the date right, but not the year. They were 3 years early.
When Germany was crushing it, where they were at their peak, we find out that they were doing very well in the war.
Yeah, the Nazis were doing a good job. They were really nailing it.
From a military standard, and that was the confusion, right? These guys come in and say, yeah, we know you're losing. It's like, what? No, we're not. Get these guys out of here. Get these fuckers out of here. Be thankful I'm not having you up against the wall and shot.
Yeah, I mentioned the Mel Brooks thing earlier about it, making Nazis silly. This film doesn't quite go to the same extent where, the Nazis are ludicrously, farcically bumbling buffoons, but it played it a lot more subtly, the buffoonery. Like, Hitler, I mean, you see in the YouTube poop opening credits, you see actual Hitler there. And if you look past the goofy editing and the music, you are seeing Hitler doing
what he does,
what Hitler did. Speeches, the confident look, and the actor playing him in the film. I liked how he played Hitler getting like fed up with things happening.
Yeah,
like just people kept coming into the room, distracting Hitler from his little planning with his group.
He'd keep calling upon Himmler. So almost like Himmler was his maid or
his,
nanny.
Like, his butler, like, all right, can you sort this out now, please? And our kind of leader of the Nazi trio, he's trying to play that whole time travel trope where you're revealing that you're a time traveler by showing like, oh, look, I can predict events. And he's like trying to go through all these things like, in exactly 3.5 minutes, you will receive a phone call from this person telling you this major piece of news, and that will make you realize that I am telling the truth. And Hitler is like half about it, where he's like, okay, let's actually see this play out, but also 3.5 minutes. I'm going to get impatient like 30 seconds in and try to, rush off this whole thing. And he orders like executions left and right for these guys. And yeah, you're really seeing the Nazi plan fall apart.
And whoa, the journey there too is insane because they stop this car and there's like an admiral inside and they just spray a thing in his face that makes his whole body go green
Mm.
and he goes stiff. And that becomes very important because the Nazis find this guy because they just dumped his body out and they find him, bring him in, and he's still able to talk and he's like blaming them and they've broken this guy's leg off because they were carrying him and it broke off and he's like screaming in pain and his leg falls down and one of the Nazis tries to pick it up and put it under their shoulder like nothing's happening and it's all fine. And what I found just such a moment of the movie, all of this hijinks has had, you and I, this is catnip for us. We love the absurdity of these Czech movies and how they just have this certain energy to them and these ludicrous yet enjoyable premises and characters. But in each one of them, there's a legitimately great moment of filmmaking and or drama. And when they have Hitler watching the projection on the wall of the defeat of Germany and him learning about how things go, that was unironically just masterfully done and moving. I was like, oh my God, like it's Hitler. Obviously, I hate him, but it's like, this is not played for laughs. This is just a genuine moment. It's like that idea, that scene, that could be the heart for a pitch of a genuinely serious version of this movie's premise.
Yeah, this is like Hitler going through a nightmarish realization, and we should emphasize as this film, is about time looping, and you have recurring scenes and things like that, and you do have a second time where they come back to this 1941 period. Hitler's only really in this first loop. It's just for this one scene where he's, doing the plan and having all the misunderstandings. And like the last I really remember seeing of him, unless I'm mistaken, is this like little scene that we're talking about now where he's watching the projection of his downfall, and
he gets it. He understands what it is.
yeah, he's panicking, he throws the projection distraught, and yeah, it let's just say neo-Nazis won't find it cool.
It's a short film. That moment's like a little short film.
Yeah.
And it was just executed perfectly. And it didn't take away from the slapstick or the high comedy that is here, but it adds to not only the stakes, but I guess the emotional core that's here too, because this movie, although silly, this isn't as throwaway silly and light and fluffy like some of the other Czech movies we've done. This isn't going to have the high highs of something like Dinner for Adele, where one of the characters is grabbing a sausage out of his pocket and eating it all the time because that's funny. This movie doesn't go for those type of gags, and instead it goes for the gag of the premise itself. Like the premise is the gag of like, how can we fuck around with time travel? What's the way we fuck around with looping back and forth and making the Nazis fail constantly and having them lose? Like, what do we do there? Instead of any of the characters themselves being particularly funny, which I appreciate. It's a diversity of the range of comedy, because in my eyes, no one specific character in this movie or performance, I would say, was hilarious in comparison to, say, when we do other Czech films, we can even tell you actors or characters that are like, they're very funny.
Yeah. Oh, anyone in Lemonade Joe is, amazing, pretty much.
Our favorite.
Milos Kopecky, I think.
Milos Kopecky, who I missed in this. He would have been great as Hitler. But I don't know if you agree with that statement or not. Did you find like any particular character to be funny? Because I found it was more the circumstances they were in.
The closest I could say are the Americans, because they do kind of have that sort of back and forth where every back and forth they have with each other, they say their names at the end, which are Patrick and Shirley. Usually it's Shirley speaks first and says, like, isn't that right, Patrick? Or something like that. And it's like, yes, absolutely, Shirley, or something like that.
They clearly hate each other.
and when they get sat down on the plane, and the Nazis reveal that they're, gonna hijack the whole flight,
They're excited.
Shirley has an initial reaction of like genuine delight, like, ooh, I'm getting to see a real hijacking.
They were funny. Like, they were the closest to me of just like genuinely hilarious, while the rest of them, they served the purpose of like, oh, it's kind of funny to see this one get the downfall of the body in the trunk is going to get them in this way, or this or this or this. And our main character, he's the straight man. He never really gets a lot of zingers or funny moments. His funny stuff is coming from being in a time travel story and having to comprehend it and then explain it and then progress through it. And for that sake, it does it like really well. And I just, like I said, there's a mean streak in the movie too. Like, they go through this loop. The Nazis get completely fucking owned in the movie. Like, the head one that was wanting this all to happen because he's a younger version of himself in the past and all of this, he gets executed. He gets stuck in the past, and his beloved Third Reich turn on him because they don't give a fuck about...
Well, didn't he got executed by his younger self, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, like, his beloved image of himself and of the Third Reich is this nostalgic haze, while in reality, if you have one thing out of line, they'll fucking shoot you in the head.
Yeah.
Because you do not meet the standards. And
he's already suspicious, yeah.
yeah. And there's that mean streak. And then the one who survives the loop, he immediately just executes our main character. Thankfully, our main character lives, of course. But there was a moment of doubt. It's like, oh, is our main character dead? Because we then cut back to the start of the time loop again. And it's like, oh, maybe this one's going to go through it and somehow it changes. And then when the one that survives, the mustached one, he comes in to explain to the other two about how they've already tried and this is what happened and this is what went wrong. And then he proceeds to shoot one of them because, like, well, there's already one that exists. Yeah. And he's saved Charles. He assumes, he doesn't know that the guy has failed. And just they then casually make jokes about how they just executed this guy and just, it's fine.
He has a very matter-of-fact, rule about, like, there can only be, one version of anyone in the timeline, so, one has to die. And he even says it about himself.
The main reason is, I don't want to have to split a paycheck between two of us. That's his reason. That's his reason. And he makes a joke about, and think about this guy's poor wife. It's bad enough to have one of him. It's like, so just brutal in that way. And then when those characters get their comeuppance again and again, it's just a joy. It's just such a joy. That was my favorite aspect of the movie, was just seeing these Nazis get their comeuppance. But again, the thing to emphasize, if you have not seen the movie before, these characters, like these three fascists, are not played as like bumbling buffoons. This isn't Home Alone or something. Like, they're played as genuine.
Yeah.
These actors aren't playing it up for laughs or anything. Like, they are playing it as if this is a drama.
No, they're played as genuinely as like the leads of the Einstein film, even, where those ones were the heroes.
Yeah, and what did you think about when the movie did start to play around with what we had seen before and backtrack and fill in some details of things that we maybe got tipped off about earlier, when it starts to do the full time travel, timey-wimey stuff?
No, yeah, I did like, because in the second loop, I mentioned how in the first Nazi scene, the Nazi characters were trying to, predict events that were coming up, and then that failed on them. And even our hero in the second loop was having that happen to him as well, where he was on the phone with his brother's boss, and he was saying, like, okay, in a few minutes, you're gonna walk in on an awkward scene of me and your secretary, like, on top of each other, and you're gonna be there because you're getting files or something, and that scene doesn't end up happening
Because he warned him.
He warned him. Yeah, things were changing around. And I did like how that was playing on both sides, how both characters, both factions, I'll say, were trying to be smart about the fact that they were in a time travel story, and it bit them a few times.
I also like in time travel stories like this where the characters are aware of their choices that they make and the butterfly effect and the bootstrap paradox and all of that, that no matter what, there's something in, whether it's the human condition or that character specifically, or again, as I mentioned before, the grand nebulousness of time, reality, and fate, that certain things just recur no matter what, such as the roses, the lady who sells the roses, no matter what, in each loop, he's going to get 7 roses because it's good luck. And that always kept happening. And the movie ends on that in particular. Like, that's where the movie is ending on. And I thought that was such an interesting thing because even in spite of all of the science fiction he's gone through, he's still gambling on just luck winning out. And that's an example of that because he comes to several points in which he just kind of throws his hands up in the air and accepts that no matter how much forethought or planning he puts into these things, it may not work out that way. So we just gotta ride it out and see how it goes.
I do like also that outside of the Nazis, who obviously their motivation is to do this thing, you have a setting where time travel is just a thing that exists, and no one really seems to be trying to like manipulate that for their own ends. Like when Charles dies, our main character doesn't go like, "Oh, I should go back in time and stop this." It's just like a thing that you don't do. So it almost kind of emphasizes that, like, oh, the fact that the Nazis are thinking this means that they're on that sick of a level.
And you can just arrest the Nazis just as you would with any petty criminal and throw them in the paddy wagon and just off they go.
When you put it that way, yeah, that was funny.
Like, it's not like a federal operation sting where they've got it's just like, I heard something nefarious is going. The most genuinely like tense arrest for me is that one guy in the airport that never really had any repercussions. The one who would come over and take that guy's like box of clothes or whatever, that one.
Yeah.
He always in the time loops never had anything to him because he wasn't involved like in the time travel itself. He just was in the airport.
Yeah.
But I like that they got him too. And that was shot like a genuinely like eerie, moody moment that you would see in a cop film or in a thriller where it's like, we even got
caught
you too.
red-handed.
Yeah. And we even got you too. Like we even got you, the little guy. You thought you could get away? We got you too.
I just transcript that. Did I say head-handed or not?
Red-handed. Let's say you said red-handed.
Yeah. I think we were talking at the same time. I couldn't tell, but something felt wrong.
It's okay. We'll let it go, baby boy Bartek.
I want to know if I was wrong or not.
Sorry. Play it back. I'm not going to do that. You play it back at home. But he makes a choice as things goes along to have multiple versions of himself. So the Nazis are very much like, no. You can't have more than one version of yourself. You need to kill that other one because you're the prime version and they're not. And our main character disagrees with that by the end. He's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I think it'd actually benefit me to keep lying, keep doing shit, keep my past self around and let them live a version of this life and I live a version of my brother's life. I love that, honestly.
He did say earlier on that, I want your life. I would appreciate it. And that's where he ends up.
I like that he helps himself to also get a better life. It's not just like, oh, I just because of being here first, I'm going to get the better opportunities. He also goes out of his way to help his previous, like his other self, to have a better way of things. Hence, you even end the movie on the other version giving a thumbs up, a Twin Peaks thumbs up. And I love that. Did you think they were going to do because they tease it at the end, the typical thing you see in these, like the 12 Monkeys, the typical thing of, you thought you could defeat time, but you're going to get killed, because they tease that. I mean, he almost gets run over himself. at the end. When he's in the street, he almost gets run over by the paddy wagon, and then he's like, hey, oh, be careful. And then he sees the Nazis in the back. Did you even think for a moment that the film could commit to an ending like that?
No, it didn't cross my mind.
When it did that moment, I remember being in my seat being like, oh, I was actually surprised that he lived, because I was like, oh, because that's a viable option for this movie, is he could get hit by a car and it just, the old version of him that exists there would just go on.
The film definitely has a matter-of-factly blasé attitude towards death, whereas many characters die throughout the film, and it's never, other than for our main character that his twin brother died, it's never something that's dwelled on too much.
Was it satisfying though that both of these guys get to live, and the one that we followed along the way does eventually assume his brother's identity, but he's going to do it in a good way, and the other one is just like this hapless, clueless guy who's just like, okay, sure.
Yeah, it was. Again, it played into that comedic attitude the film has about death, but also had this sort of, fairy tale logic to where, like, well, no, all of these elements here are happy. He's going to be a better Charles than Charles was, and there's a version of himself that is just being himself.
Yeah, I recommend this movie. If you have still not seen this, it is available, as I said, on YouTube. It's an easy watch. It goes down. The pacing is really good. It has some great sequences, and it's just a fun time to see Nazis get what they deserve. There's just some wacky shit in there on the occasion. They're throwing their grenades at their own Nazi officer friends, and they're just like the Nazis are feeling bad about throwing and shooting back at fellow Nazis. That was an amusing little detail that they had in there. Like, one of them was hesitating to throw grenades at them. And what are the Nazi grenades called again? Like, they have those specific ones that they have, like, where they're like on the stick.
They have like a little, I don't know the name.
I've played Medal of Honor games. They have the names of those ones in those games. So
I've played some games that have.
I may have to scrub back and find out what they are. But I recommend this. I think it's a good time. I'm glad that there are people who are keen and excited for us to do more Czech films. And please, if you have any Czech films you want us to look into and do on the podcast, or look into in our own spare time, recommend them to us. We will try our best to find them and find ones that we can obviously enjoy, because subtitles is the thing, as well as just availability. I mentioned Happy End earlier. That used to be like a public domain type one where it was just on YouTube and Wikipedia and stuff. And it was in the list of those, like, these are zany movies you can watch online for free. Not anymore. It just can't do it.
Yeah,
there's no DVD with English subtitles. It fucking kills me, because I know online there were English subtitles for it.
Yeah,
and it just kills me.
We both have our stories. Like, you've got the Foon thing where SBS wouldn't give the subtitles.
Oh man, Foon is a movie I'd love to do on the pod, but it's impossible.
You made it sound good, yeah.
It's so good.
And remember a few years...
It has a 3.4 on IMDb, but I think it's a 10.
A few years ago, we had the running joke about that African film that I wanted to do. We've long since stopped talking about that one because I just couldn't find it.
Tragic.
But we do have success stories sometimes. We did do that Polish film.
And we have this as a success story. There's another one that's in my checklist that's about a cat that wears special glasses. That's all I'll say.
I already recommend that film.
So tomorrow I'll wake up and scold myself with tea. Did it live up to the hype, and would you recommend?
I do recommend it. In terms of hype, yeah, we had 2 or 3 YouTube commenters recommend this one. Basically, all the Czech recommendations we've gotten are in the YouTube comments of the other Czech films we watched. So if you go to the Lemonade Joe, Dinner for Adele, and Gentlemen, I Murdered Einstein comment section, you'll probably see the various titles that we have on our list.
Yes, I'm glad. I hope the people, from Czech or elsewhere that grew up with these movies or deeply familiar with them, hope you enjoy our commentary on them, and what we have to say about them is just a couple of schmoes from Australia who stumbled across Lemonade Joe and was just fascinated by all of the filmmaking and the acting and the comedy there, and wanted more, because this is great. I'll just say it. the 60s to the 70s to the early 80s for Czech filmmaking. Gold. It's been nothing but gold. I've yet to encounter one that I was like, I really didn't like this one. There's ones that I like more than others, but they've all been enjoyable.
We haven't hated any of them. There are some that we disagree on, like, oh, that one was better than that one, but no, none that we've hated.
So
Lemonade Joe's still our top one, though, I think.
I don't think anything will beat Lemonade Joe. The fact that it's in Lemonade Yellow is impeccable. And when we covered that, Julio was like, I don't see the purpose of this. And all of us were like, because it's funny. It's really funny. And it's just amusing that randomly it's like, now they're sad, it goes to blue. But what is your recommendation for the film we'll be covering next, Bartek? It is your turn.
It is. I've been waiting in line, and it's finally my turn. And I had a friend, keep my place in the line because I had to go to the toilet at one point.
Okay.
Yeah. He went home, so, he's gone now. The film that I'm recommending for next week is a film that I have seen before, but it was under weird circumstances, and I don't remember too much about it. So I want to rewatch it to remember what it is. I think it is a film adaptation of a Stephen King book. It's from 1998, I think. It's called Apt Pupil. Do you know this one?
Yes, I do. I was going to share a fun trivia fact of why I do, but then I remembered the trivia fact is about the pedophile director, so we can enjoy that conversation for the next episode.
When I was looking up the film, I was like, that's the name of the film, right? I saw who it was directed by. I'm like, oh, I've heard of this director. Not too many great things, but I've heard of him.
He made some great movies, but a bad guy. I mean, he did the X-Men movies. That's why Ian McKellen is in the X-Men movies, because they did Apt Pupil.
Oh, there you go.
That's why he's Magneto.
Have you seen Apt Pupil?
Yes.
Okay.
So we will get to, but I've only seen it once when I was like 15. So I will be keen to give this a watch and go through it because it's very hazy. And basically what I remember is those facts I just said, and Ian McKellen's really good in it. And other one or two little things, but we won't get into it for the sake of people who have not seen Apt Pupil. Make sure to give it a watch for yourself. In the meantime, make sure to tune in for our next discussion so that you can be all ready for our learning about why this pupil is so apt.
I think it's a pretty apt follow-up to this film, which has Nazis in it. Yeah.
I was going to, yep. And I thought you were going to say, as a teacher yourself, you're really always after apt pupils of certain ways of learning.
Yeah, I like to steal their eyes.
Yeah. So Apt Pupil, everyone, watch it. In the meantime, you can find us on social media under Spit and Polish Presents. You can email us over at
spitandpolished@gmail.com.
Recommend films to us so we can add them to the list. We're growing shorter on our film list, so feel free to add to it if we can find it, and if it's an actual movie. TV movie stuff is a lot more difficult to find, and also, they're kind of less interesting to talk about. Like actual movies would be appreciated. So please head on over to our social medias or email us with any questions or thoughts on things we've said, as well as recommend things to us. But until next time, remember that the Nazis are a joke. They're bad. They suck. If you do time travel and try to restore their glory, you're a fucking dope, and you should be executed by your younger self. Like a dog. Like a dirty dog.
I do like that in my day-to-day life, I do not see them much.